All right, what I'm going to tell you is very important. I want you to listen very closely. This is really critical to understand. The guy running Department of Homeland Security has an agenda, and you need to understand it. He talks out of both sides of his mouth. He doesn't tell you what the real agenda is. Now, why won't he tell you what the real agenda is? Very simple. He thinks if you knew, in fact, what he was doing, you wouldn't support it. Now, that should make some sense. He's the Secretary of Homeland Security. Alejandro Mayorkas is in charge of the Homeland Security Department. What does that mean? He's in charge of administering the immigration laws, national security, terrorism, cybersecurity, border security, all that security, right? The implementation and enforcement of immigration law is a key component of national security. Mayorkas does not believe, however, that he has a responsibility to enforce U.S. immigration law as it is written. Now, for years at FAIR, we have warned about the possibility that this could happen. Because of the asymmetry in the court system and the difficulty citizens have in gaining standing, we always felt that a rogue executive who would take it under his own authority to just start admitting aliens. Now, he doesn't call them aliens anymore. He calls them non-citizens or what have you. And using or expanding definitions of parole would just let millions of people run into the country without any limit. Mayorkas has done this on a two-pronged basis, okay? First, what he's doing is he's saying we're going to stop people at the border, but he's not stopping people at the border. They're running into the country, turning themselves into Border Patrol agents, being shipped in all over the country. And yes, there's a handful that are being removed, but most of that's what we call for show. It's a small number of people relative to the total number of people crossing that border. Second thing that's happening is he's issuing these new enforcement guidelines, okay? Here they are, right here, enforcement guidelines. He says here, the reason he issued these enforcement guidelines is because courts say you cannot just make blanket exemptions on who can be deported and who can't be. So he came up with this case-by-case enforcement guidelines that basically says, yeah, we're doing case-by-case, but these are the basic rules. Okay, listen to this. For the first time, our guidelines will, in the pursuit of public safety, require an assessment of the individual and take into account the totality of facts and circumstances, okay? Which I thought was basically the role of a judge, right? In exercising this discretion, we are guided by the knowledge that there are individuals in this country who have been here for generations and contributed to this country's well-being. If a person's been here for generations, then the children are U.S. citizens, so nobody's been here illegally for generations, all right? Who have been here for generations and contributed to this country's well-being, including those who have been on the front lines in the battle against COVID, lead congregations of faith, and teach our children. As we strive to provide them a path to citizenship, we will not work in conflict by spending resources seeking to remove those who do not pose a threat and, in fact, make our nation stronger. Okay? Now let's try to unpack this. What he's saying is, I, Mayorkas, am going to take into myself the authority to decide who goes and who doesn't, based on some godlike power to ignore all the immigration law and decide, I like you, so you get to stay, and you're a good guy, so you get to stay, but you're a bad guy, so yeah, we'll put you in removal proceedings, but everybody else gets to stay. And he decides completely on his own initiative, right, without regard to what the law says, who and how many people are going to be removed. Now, this is a tyranny, okay? This is lawless behavior. This is without any kind of legal authority. He has no, they call it prosecutorial discretion, but the fact is, this is a civil status. This isn't a criminal conduct, a criminal prosecution. This is a civil status. Somebody giving out Social Security checks, that's a civil benefit. Doesn't have the right to just hand out Social Security checks to everybody they like. In the same way, the Department of Homeland Security cannot give out quasi-immigration benefits to anybody they like, okay? Then he turns around and he says, I'm also going to be pushing a mass amnesty. I want to push a mass amnesty bill. So in the absence of congressional action to make everybody legal, I'm going to just basically pretend that they're legal. Well, you know what? Congress may never pass an amnesty. But if you tell everybody, don't worry, you're never going to be removed while they push for an amnesty, well, obviously we're going to have continued massive illegal immigration. So you're letting most of them in, but you're telling the American people they shouldn't come and they will be removed. But you're also telling them you're not going to be removed. And nobody's going to be removed unless you're one of those handful of people who come within his guidelines. So effectively, he's rolling up ice and saying, you guys have nothing to do. You're like the Maytag repairmen. You may as well go home. You know, turn on reruns of Seinfeld or something. I mean, think about it. This is a country that is highly diverse, tied together by a very few common things. Some traditions, customs, the rule of law, common language. And now look at this. Look at this. This guy, Mayorkas, apparently with the complicity of Biden, somehow thinks that immigration can be properly controlled by having a rogue agency decide that they will just, on their own motion, let people in, many of them not properly vetted, without proper verification of identity, people kind of leaking out of Air Force bases and things like that from Afghanistan and other places. This is simply not acceptable. This is not the law. This is not acceptable. It's not part of the American tradition. It isn't what ties us together as a people. I think everybody believes somewhere it's possible to craft an immigration program that actually serves this country's interest. But under this administration, we have total chaos and total anarchy, an unsustainable process. To sit there and tell the American people that they're going to be removed if they don't qualify, if Jen Psaki, we call her Win Psaki, Jen Psaki is going to say, oh, if they're not eligible, they'll be removed. That is a lie, okay? Flat out lie, as attested to by these guidelines. Enforcement priorities for apprehension and removal remain focused on non-citizens who are a threat to national security, public safety, and border security. But he says the guidelines break from a categorical approach because that's what the courts decided. But it is a categorical approach. The worst part of this whole thing is that they now are using these intentionally obfuscatory terms. They want to obscure the reality, right? Alien is no longer permitted. They're calling them non-citizens, but it's not accurate to call them a non-citizen. An alien is a person who is not a citizen of your country, our country. You're an alien, you're a citizen of another country. You call somebody a non-citizen, that's not true. They are a citizen of another country in almost all cases. So they're not a non-citizen. They're a citizen, just not of the United States. Call them an undocumented worker or what have you, illegal immigrant. Immigrant implies an intention to remain. So an immigrant is not an alien. An alien is a non-citizen, a citizen from another country who is in your country, legally or illegally. And if an illegally residing alien is in your country, that means that they're an alien. It doesn't mean they intend to immigrate, but an immigrant does. Now, what's a migrant? They have a migrant now as a term. Even the networks, Fox News and Breitbart, are using the term migrant. What does a migrant mean? A migrant is a person who's moving. A migrant might move from LA to San Francisco. You migrate from one place to another, but there's no international and there's no legal implication there. The term alien and citizen goes back to ancient Greece. Or before that even. I mean, it's a citizen and an office holder in a democracy. It has a great significance. This administration wants to water down these distinctions, and language can exercise a tyranny over the affairs of mankind. There's no question, over human affairs, no question about it. So what we see here is a rogue agency, a law unto itself, a tyranny, and doing so for partisan political reasons. Now, many of you are going to say, well, Dan, are you hard-hearted? What about these people who've been here for 35 years and who are working hard? I mean, shouldn't they have a chance to stay? Well, first of all, how can the administration talk about an amnesty while people are running across the border? What kind of confidence? The government seems to be completely inept and overwhelmed. Then you're going to turn around and pass an amnesty? Secondly, if there was a decision to let somebody stay who's been here a long period of time, perfectly permissible, but it needs to be balanced against proper protocols moving forward, getting in place real reforms like what the Trump administration was moving toward to stop future illegal immigration. And the other thing is, just because someone's allowed to stay who's in their 40s or 50s doesn't mean they always have to be allowed to become citizens. People who enter by breaking U.S. immigration law should not be allowed to become citizens. Why? Because people who become citizens get petitioning rights from more relatives. So a big amnesty program then presents a problem of many more relatives getting in line, overburdening a system that's already out of control. Right now, Department of Homeland Security is admitting aliens without even a notice to appear for a court date and tell them 60 days to report to an ICE office. If they report, which most of them don't, they may get a notice to appear, maybe years down the line in a court system, right? Which, as I've told you before, isn't working. So now Mayorkas is saying you're never going to be removed. So why would they bother showing up for their hearing? I mean, let's just think about this kind of common sense. Why won't they just tell you what they're doing? Which is essentially say, unless they have some particular reason for wanting to remove you because they think you're a known terrorist or a multiple recidivist murderer, immigration is otherwise effectively unlimited. This cannot be sustained. I mean, when Jay Johnson and Barack Obama are telling you your immigration policy is off the rails, man, maybe it's really off the rails.